Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast, episode number 70. This is our Q&A episode 6. This is our 6 Ask a Black Belt segment, our favorite and only reoccurring segment on the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast.
Yeah, unfortunately, we no longer have the synchronized like episode 70, Ask a Black Belt, episode 7, because we missed it. Episode 50 was our, yay, half century. This episode sucks. Although I've had quite a few people tell me they listened to it and they're like, man, that episode was super funny. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah, it was a bit different. It definitely put the beyond in Beyond Jiu Jitsu. But without further ado.
Have we received any? No, we haven't yet. A while ago, on one of the episodes, I said, if anyone has any requests for episode 100.
No, we haven't received any.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's taken us up.
Someone would be like, I don't know, you guys get drunk or eat this or I don't know.
Well, once we get closer, I'll definitely put out some polls on our Instagram, which is at Beyond Jiu Jitsu _podcast, and our YouTube. So let's get straight into these questions. We have a whole host of questions to go through today. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted their audio questions.
Do they send them via audio?
They send them via audio.
That's amazing.
You're about to hear them. He's already heard them. Okay, so first question is from Pedro.
Hey guys, so consider a new blue belt that already has a game, but a short game. Should that blue belt invest in tuning his short game or invest on adding new tools to the tool belt? Thanks.
Excellent question. Over to you, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Pedro. Thanks for the question. I'm assuming what you mean by a short game is a limited game, like you've got your A game, your short game being your sort of go-to moves, techniques, or whatever. And it is a good question. The classic, it depends, right? What do you want to do with your jiu-jitsu? At the end of the day, it's your training and it's what you want to get out of it. In short answer, my advice would be add more tools to the tool belt. But yeah, it depends. So if you're saying like, hey man, I think I want to teach jiu-jitsu one day, blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, you got to add more tools to the tool belt. You're never going to be specialized in everything, but to think that you would want to teach jiu-jitsu. And if someone said, oh, can you show me a spider guard sweep? And you're like, ask that guy, right? But are you a blue belt who is currently wanting to compete a lot and be super active in competition? And most of the really good guys are almost obsessive compulsive about the particular thing they do. And they develop that, to use your words, short game to, beyond belief.
Yeah, they go sub-specialize.
Yeah,
they specialize in that little niche of the sport.
Yeah, and then even one little detail, then it's like the most crazy mind map of just like one technique, I'll always give the example of like bearing bolos. Man, it's not like, they've just gotten crazy good at one variation of a bearing bolo. Man, it's just they go down and like you can ask them any like the most, hey, this happens in 1 in a million rolls. Yeah. But what do I do when this happens? And they'll be like, oh yeah, you do this, because they've gone to that 1 in a million detail.
You'd know that concept if you've seen enough BJJ instructionals. You can have like an 8-9 hour instructional on one specific guard. And you're like, how? But then you watch it and they have every single what if scenario possible. Yeah. Like what if this and then 3 variations? What if that? And then another 3 or 4 variations. Yeah, that's it as well.
Because that'll be a what if. And the answer will have multiple like, well, if they do this, you could do this or this or this. And then there's a what if on those next
100%.
Scenarios.
The concept that you talk about with the mind map and the branches, like that's a
good
way to visualize it.
Right?
Yeah.
We have a student, Ollie, who likes to mind map stuff. For me, that just sounds like the most daunting task ever.
Oh, they're really, really interesting. Particularly if you're like, because I'm doing a lot of what he's doing at the moment. Like we're doing, well, I'm sort of following him a little bit, and he's shown me like mapping out the techniques that we're learning. And I'm like, holy shit, this is like visualizing it is so powerful.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to Pedro.
Yeah. So it's, I hate to say it depends, Pedro, but if you put it like that, if you're wanting to be a competitor, there's no harm spending like a good amount of time just specializing and subspecializing, because by default, other tools will get added to the belt anyway, because other things will come up. If you're subspecializing in, I don't know, in passing or whatever, there'll come a time where all your teammates start sweeping you, and you're going to be forced to add some guard tools to your belt. So by default, you're going to add more tools to the belt. The reason I say my advice would be to add more tools to the belt, well, I mean, I've passed my competitive years and I'm now old and useless and, more of lean more towards being an instructor. So I want to know more things, but it's also for me what I find the most enjoyable. If we're talking about playing a video game like Street Fighter or something, I'm not one of those people who, played the same character all the time and only ever played that character. I'll play one for a little while, then get bored with that character, do a different one. And my jiu-jitsu is kind of similar. I like to have fun with my jiu-jitsu, and I always want it to be like fun and new. And, I get, for lack of a better word, I get bored doing the same techniques.
Yeah.
I would really struggle to, of course I have my A game if I'm going to go compete, but as a whole, in terms of just what brings me happiness, training jiu-jitsu, it's the variety and the doing lots of different stuff.
And I would add my 2 cents in here and say the more you understand of jiu-jitsu as a whole, the better you'll get at your specialization, because you'll understand what your opponent's doing. Because
that's a good point.
They say the best way to shut down any sort of technique is to understand the technique, right?
Yeah.
If you're really, really good at De La Riva, and then all of a sudden you're in someone's De La Riva, you know what they're trying to achieve. You know the objectives, you know the counters, so you'll be able to counter the counter. And then we get into like that whole chess match where it's like, you know what they know, but they know you know.
Yeah.
And then, and then it goes from there, right? So, I mean, my perspective on it is and this is from the advice you've given me, for context for those that don't know, I'm a competitor. I focus on my A game first and foremost, particularly when we're coming up to a big comp, but also I am trying to add more A games, right? Trying to add a B game, trying to add a C game. So I have backup and I have redundancy and I have like different strengths in different areas.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Pedro, that's not just like a very clear do this, because so much of jiu-jitsu does depend. But yeah, think about it like that. I mean, as a blue belt, you're still at such an early stage of your development as well as a jiu-jitsu practitioner that, I mean, you could be a purple or brown belt before you settle into what becomes your game.
Yeah.
The perfect example is Marcelo Garcia, known as one of the best pound for pound fighters of all time, and particularly known as being incredibly good in no-gi, like ADCC, and, none of his positions or whatever requiring gi grips and all that stuff. He never really even trained no-gi until brown belt.
Wow.
Right. So plenty of time for you, so if you specialize just in the one thing at blue belt, I'm not saying it's a wrong thing to do, because I know blue belts who do it and have gone on to become incredibly successful, even, as competitors and instructors. But there might be something you haven't learned or played with yet that you might fall in love with or be naturally gifted at. And if you don't try it, how are you going to know?
Awesome. Okay. Next question from Vincent.
Hey, Kieren and Adam, big fan of the show. I just wanted to ask you, so what strength and conditioning exercises do you incorporate into your training program so that you can optimize your BJJ performance? Thank you. Love the show.
This is an excellent question, Vincent. And it just so happens that I've been doing a lot of work in this space currently. I'm working on something that I'm not ready to announce yet, but it's going to come soon. So strength and conditioning for jiu-jitsu. When we talk about strength and conditioning, basically we're talking about getting strong and getting cardio fit or conditioned for jiu-jitsu. Now, there's a lot of different theories in the S&C for sport space. And what I mean by that is you see a lot of specific training for sports. Like you've probably seen or you may not have, but there's videos on the internet of like pro baseball players like doing very specific like throwing exercise where they have these crazy contraptions and they're like throwing a weight up like a slider and swinging like a bat that's connected to a weight. And
oh yeah, I saw that video recently.
the one that really got popularized.
Oh, was that the one? Sorry, I might be thinking of a different one, but maybe the same contraption,
like
of
a javelin. Yeah, 100% javelin, like that,
so this
throwing
big
arm
thing on this massive slide with the weight. Yeah.
So there's a lot of research in this field and a lot of different opinions. And I want to just be upfront that some experts in this field say that it's bullshit, that sort of like specific training doesn't really translate because it doesn't replicate the movement and it puts you in obscure positions that don't really translate as well. So the best concept is to develop your muscle in a different way so that the system is more integrated. Like you can strengthen the entire system, therefore it will respond to the stimulus of sport, right? Mm-hmm. So we have another concept, and then I'll bring it and simplify it at the end. But we have this other concept called the SAID principle, SAID, or specific adaptation to impose demands. Basically, that means that your body will adapt to the demand you put on it. Now, this can work for us and against us when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Let's just put it into practical sense and give you a real world example. In the gym, if you want to do a specific movement for jiu-jitsu that you see on the mats all the time, maybe take a Turkish get-up, for example. For those that don't know, a Turkish get-up is holding a kettlebell, starting on the floor, laying on your back, holding a kettlebell above you and standing up with that kettlebell.
Pretty much a technical stand-up,
exactly.
Holding a weight up above your head.
100%. Yeah.
Not pretty much what it is. That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is. It's a technical stand-up with a kettlebell above your head. So if you did that movement in the gym consistently, guess what? When it comes to the mats, if you find yourself in that position, you'll be freaking strong in that technical stand-up position. And if no one's ever done that to you, it's very effective. It can be very, very strong. Just sit up from guard. However, I will caveat everything I'm saying that in my personal opinion, the best training to support your jiu-jitsu off the mats is the training that you're willing to do, the training that you enjoy doing, and the training you want to do. So when it comes to strength work for jiu-jitsu, do the strength work that you enjoy doing and that you're going to do consistently. If you just froth on everything and you don't care, you're willing to go through anything to get better at jiu-jitsu, then I recommend structuring your training around the big compound lifts. Compound lifts are your squats, your deadlifts, and variations of pressing. So for jiu-jitsu, bench press is not necessarily the best, but there are variations of the bench press like floor press, like kettlebell presses, dumbbell presses that are a bit better. Okay, so focus your workout around those. And I'd even add in pull, so a heave. So I know deadlifts are pull, but I'd add in a body weight style heave or a weighted heave. So that's an overhand pull up for those that are uninitiated. So focus your program around those four. And then everything on top of that should be accessories to support either your jiu-jitsu directly, such as a Turkish get-up, your core strength and your grip strength. I couple those together, and other accessory work to strengthen the big four. Because if you strengthen the big four, again, those are squats, deadlifts, some form of pressing, and your overhand heaves, then your jiu-jitsu will get better because you will be stronger. Now, this question didn't specifically talk about mobility, but I highly recommend incorporating mobility into that as well. You can do weighted mobility work such as Cossack squats, other forms of weighted mobility. But yeah, so that's how I structure my programs, focusing on the big four, having accessory work to support the big four, and then having core and grip work and mobility, weight-based mobility work to support your functional movement and to support your grip strength and core strength, which should not be neglected. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah. So yeah, my 2 cents to that would be, more leaning to what you said of the best program's the one you're going to do. And, whether it's you like doing it or you don't like doing it or you don't have a lot of time to do it, right? There's some strength and mobility programs and whatever that are like, you're going to do this and you're going to work out, do 3 to 4 sessions a week, blah, blah, blah. And maybe you're thinking, well, I only have 3 to 4 sessions of jiu-jitsu a week. Like, because of my life and schedule. So I don't have time to do 3 or 4 S&C. Then I may as well do CrossFit because I'm not even doing jiu-jitsu anymore or whatever, right? So, you can't have it all, right? You're not going to be as strong and flexible and mobile as a gymnast and have time to do jiu-jitsu, right? So you've got to, you got to kind of
you got to remember the goal, right? The goal is to incorporate strength training to support the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So for me, if it's not, there's only like probably, actually no, pretty much none. If it's not really directly translatable into jiu-jitsu, I don't have time for it. I don't do it. So like you said, bench press, useless for jiu-jitsu. But like dumbbell press and things like that, like dumbbell press is great. Just simply the fact that, you're then having to hold the weight on an individual like arm, right? It's not supported by the one bar. It's this much more dynamic press where you're using much smaller muscle, not smaller, you're using the same muscles, but like you've got to stabilize that weight, right? Your wrist mobility and your forearms and all that stuff makes it considerably harder than a regular bench press, right? Deadlifts are great. It's pretty much the same as standing up in someone's closed guard, right? And especially when they sit up with you, right? Renegade rows I really like is a great pulling action that could be very similar to doing a knee cut and pulling on someone's sleeve so they can't get their elbow to the mat. Also anything with resistance bands. When you think about jiu-jitsu, everything you do is resistance. Whenever you pull on something, it's pulling back. Whenever you push on something, it's pushing back, right? As a whole. Obviously, sometimes people don't pull back and they just fall flat on their face. But generally, every single push or pull you do in jiu-jitsu is met with resistance, right? So I think bands are a very good way just to incorporate it.
Yeah, very cheap as well. And you can simulate very heavy weight with like minimal material.
Yeah. So, I mean, I keep it very sort of, I'm not following some structured professional strength and conditioning program that I'm doing this 6-week cycle and I'm doing 4 sessions a week or whatever. No, right? That's not what I do. It's not what I have the time for. Even if I had the time, I probably wouldn't do it because I hate strength and conditioning personally, right? So
everything you said is now null and void.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do the things that I directly see it translate to my jiu-jitsu, and I get quicker gratification.
Yeah.
Right. Like when I am deadlifting and doing Turkish get-ups and stuff, I, not instantly as in I do a Turkish get-up, then I go roll and I go, wow, I'm stronger.
Yeah.
Right. But like, I instantly see the benefits in my jiu-jitsu. I instantly feel stronger in
there's some movements you can do that you may not see them as directly like, oh, this is unrealistic for jiu-jitsu or what have you. But then you need to look at it through the eyes of like, if it's strengthening the system, then it will strengthen you on the mats. For example, there may be some movements that like isolation movements, or I mean, it's a poor example because it does directly translate. Like take a glute bridge, for example. You might be thinking, oh, how does this, I'm never going to bridge like this. But if you're strengthening your ability to generate power through that range of motion, it's going to translate. But I totally agree with what you're saying. Doing a whole bunch of bench press or doing like a 6-week cycle on just bench press may not be the best way to strengthen your body for jiu-jitsu, but I digress. Yeah.
Yeah, you just like your big chest, bro. You just like doing bench press.
But yeah, definitely. So key takeaway, focus on the big 4, build accessory movements to support the big 4, and then have core and grip strength and other weighted mobility movements to support your movement as a human. You need to be moving through your natural ranges of motion. Get strong there. So
yeah,
that's what I recommend.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to the next question from Sky.
Hi. Thanks for letting me ask a question. I have just started as a white belt BJJ practitioner, and I come from an extensive background of martial arts, but not in anything, in my opinion, relevant to BJJ. I consider myself to be a genuine beginner. One of my questions is, I've told my instructor, but do I need to tell the other girls in my class or not? I'd really rather just keep it private. I don't really think it's relevant, and I don't want to be seen to be, not there to learn something new and to say what I've done in the past. Your advice would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah,
Awesome question.
Yeah, thanks, Sky. I get where you're coming from. Short answer would be, yeah, I don't think you need to tell anyone. Just by the sound of, you saying that you don't think any of your previous experience translates or has anything to do with jiu-jitsu, so it's irrelevant. Yeah, so that makes me think that you haven't really done any grappling before. So, yeah, you don't have to tell anyone at all. If they ask, you might want to tell them, because depending on what you've done, let's say you come from a striking background or a more traditional martial arts background like Aikido or Kung Fu or something like that, you'd be surprised that how much just your coordination and your being in tune with your own body and stuff, how far that can take you in jiu-jitsu. But that's not any skill that you can't, if you came from I don't know, a skateboarding background or a surfing background or breakdancing or ballet or whatever, any sort of sport that requires a huge amount of coordination and muscle control and things like that, those same skills would help you in jiu-jitsu.
100%.
Depending on what martial arts you've done, you might find, like, I don't know, maybe you roll with someone and they turn to you and say, man, have you done something before? Are you really a white belt? Right? Then, okay, maybe you'd be like, oh yeah, I've done a bunch of whatever in the past. But if you even if that's the case, you don't have to.
I would just generalize and say, oh, a sporting background.
You don't have to say anything. You could have a wrestling background that would translate. You don't have to tell them. But then if, you beat the crap out of them and they go, man.
You rock out with mad collies and you're an NCAA.
And they're like,
no, man, don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you smash them and they're like, Sky, you shouldn't be a white belt. You're like, oh yeah, I used to wrestle. But like, you don't have to tell them off the bat. And, like I did, my first martial art was a martial art called Hapkido, and none of it translates to jiu-jitsu other than coordination and
how to tie your belt,
how to tie my belt. Yeah. Coordination and belt tying and understanding my left and right. And, but none of it, no other aspect of it translates.
Wait, serious question. Do they do us in Hapkido?
No, they don't do us.
Us is life.
They haven't earned it.
They haven't earned the us rights.
I don't tell anyone that I've done Hapkido. Like, I remember when I first started jiu-jitsu, I told the instructor, but I was, I didn't know it had nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. I just said, oh yeah, I used to do this. But in hindsight, he was probably just like, yeah, whatever, bro. So yeah, Sky, don't worry about it. You don't have to tell them.
Yeah, you're not obligated or anything.
You're not obligated.
Absolutely not.
If you're demolishing everyone and people are asked, we've got a guy, fucking Eric. If you've listened to enough episodes, you've heard us say, fuck Eric.
Fuck
right?
Eric.
Eric's a white belt. If you rolled with him, you would swear he's done something before. He's way better than a white belt should be. But no, he's done basketball. He's an ex-professional basketball player, but he has zero other training in any martial art.
He's very tall. He's very strong. He's very coordinated.
Yeah. So let alone, he's done nothing that is a martial art, let alone anything that's relevant to jiu-jitsu, yet he's just naturally gifted. So, and on the flip side, some people are going to have wrestled in school and still suck at jiu-jitsu. So you don't have to tell them anything, Sky. If someone asks, that's up to you whether you tell them or not. But yeah, you might just say, oh yeah, I did a little bit when I was a kid or whatever.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
absolutely no obligation.
Don't stress about it at all.
Next question is from Nick.
Hey guys, big fan. I was wondering if you had any advice on how to get the most out of training or balancing a pretty busy work schedule. Turning up to a training session every night, usually 10, 15 minutes late, and oftentimes pretty tired. So if you had any tips on, how to best sort of approach training and nutrition-wise, I'd be pretty keen to hear. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. That's a tough one. That is very tough. That's something that I'm experiencing at the moment, and we're just talking about it offline. Like, I think everyone goes through periods where they're incredibly busy. I think that you need to address it as a air quote problem if it's long periods, right? If it's consistent. So I've got a little bit of advice, and then I'll hand it over to the expert. But I think one thing that I would suggest is carving out the time that you can, as in picking the days that you can train, and then doing everything you can to get there, if that makes sense. So if, for example, your schedule allows 3 days a week of training, just be consistent as you can with those 3 days a week. If you can do more, do more. But those 3 days are like gospel. Just carve it out in stone and do whatever you can to get there. Train hard, and then maybe that means cutting down. So maybe if you're someone that trains 6 times a week, maybe you need to back off to 4 and then have more dedicated, more specific, more engaging, more focused. You're more present on the mats for those 4. I'd argue that those present 4 sessions that are, hard, tough, you give it your all, would be better in the long run than doing 6 less present sessions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk about nutrition in a moment.
Yeah, because you could obviously, I was going to say things you can do nutrition wise and sleep wise to help. It's a very hard question to answer because there's a lot of variables, don't know, so we can sit here and say, make sure you leave work at this time. And, I don't know what you do for, maybe you're a doctor and you're like, well, man, I'm in surgery saving lives. I can't. Or maybe you're like, man, I can't. I got to pick the kids up from school and traffic. So obviously there's everything with a grain of salt, those things. But yeah, my advice would be very similar to what Kieren said, but I would even take it a step further. When he said carving it out in stone, I train 3 times a week. It will help, in my opinion, if you make those certain 2-3 days a week specific to the day, like the actual class. So instead of just saying I train 3 times a week, no matter what. No. I train Monday nights at 6. I train Wednesdays at 7 in the morning, and I train Thursdays at 7 in the morning. And those 3 times are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Right. The same way that it's non-negotiable that, you go to work Monday morning at 9 a.m. or whatever, you got your 9 to 5 job, right? It's like, no, like it doesn't matter if, if the dishes need to be done or whatever. It's like, well, no, I've got to go, like I got to go to work.
Yeah.
If I'm not there at 9, like I get in shit.
Yeah.
I know that's easier said than done. Take that with all the other variables of your life as well. But for, not only for your mental health and physical health, but for your progression as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, man, 2-3 times a week, set in stone, non-negotiable. When I moved to Brazil, obviously a different circumstance because I moved there for jiu-jitsu, but any job in like the first year I was there, I just trained, then I ran out of money and I needed to get a job to help pay rent and training fees and everything. But any job interview I went for, it was non-negotiable. I was like, no, like I can't work at these times because they were my training times, and there were plenty of jobs I didn't get because I refused to, work in those hours. Again, different scenario, but it was much easier for me when it was like, this is non-negotiable. The same way that this part of Sydney is a very highly Jewish area, and I'm not Jewish and I don't know much about the religion, but they have what's Shabbat, which is like a thing that goes from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, where depending how Orthodox you are, like they don't do anything. And it's just like, it's set in stone, bro. Like it doesn't matter, like unless it's a life or death situation. It's like, no, like, man, no, like, no, there's nothing. You can't get me to work on that day, or you can't get me to do this or that. Like if you have it as non-negotiable, it makes it much easier for you to turn up, and it makes it much easier for you to say no to someone when they ask you to do something like that falls in that time.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree.
That help again. In case, poor.
Don't take this
Nick
to the extreme. Like if your house is on fire.
Sitting there going, oh, easier said than done. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
right?
of course
but,
it is. Yeah.
I mean, if that works, but as a general statement, that would be my advice.
So leaning into the second part of that question that was sort of tacked on the end, but I think is really important, is any sort of nutrition concepts that can assist with this. Of course, I will say this on record that if your nutrition is on point, like if your nutrition is dialed in, if you're eating really, really well for your body type, for your goals, et cetera, all the caveats, on top of that, you will have so much more energy. You'll be performing better at work. You'll perform better on the mats. Your life will be better. Absolutely can say that wholeheartedly, 100%. If you've done that and you think, hang on a minute, that's bullshit, I don't feel better. Well, you're probably on the wrong diet, right? You're eating the wrong food. So obviously those caveats are there, but it's just, you can't argue it, right? Another point that Ads mentioned just before is sleep. Sleep is incredibly important. And let me try to, for those that haven't heard this concept before, or heard anyone talk about this, I just want to spend a little bit of time here. When it comes to recovery, like let's just use the analogy of weightlifting, because it's the exact same applies to jiu-jitsu. But let's use weight and the weightlifting analogy because it's a little bit easier to conceptualize. When you go to the gym and lift weights, it's not the time at the gym that you're getting stronger. You're actually getting weaker at the gym, right? As your workout progresses, you can lift less and less weight because you're tearing down your muscle. You're introducing micro tears into the muscle bellies, right? It's the period of time that you're not spending weightlifting, that you're recovering, that you're actually getting stronger, that you're actually getting better. So if you reduce or compromise or do anything to affect your recovery time, that's going to greatly hamper your progression. So it's really important, obviously, to train jiu-jitsu. It's really important to be there because you're not only, learning through the skill of doing and it's a fucking tough workout. You're also learning concepts. You're learning other things too. But it's the time that you spend off the mats that is just as important to recover. And a big part of recovery, a very, very significant part of recovery is sleep. So I mean, we could do a whole episode on sleep. I know we've spoken about that. We are going to do it. It's a little bit off the beaten track when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So we're trying to fit it into our schedule, but there definitely will be a episode on sleep at some point. And if you're interested in that, let us know and we'll move it up the queue. But yeah, sleep is incredibly important. So just like Adam was saying that, carve your jiu-jitsu sessions out in stone and they're non-negotiable, you should treat your sleep the same way. Within reason, obviously, but treat your sleep the same way. So there's another quick saying that I just want to sort of end this with is that you should treat yourself like you're responsible for taking care of someone, right? So treat yourself like you are someone you're responsible for taking care of. And if you have that approach to self-care, recovery, and your scheduling, then things not necessarily become easier, but I don't know, become easier, I suppose.
I'm worried for my sister because her cats are super fat. So if that's how she looks after something that she's taking care of, I'll be like, oh no.
Yeah. And that analogy actually, it's commonly used, expanded on, and talk about pets. So I mean, you can judge someone by the way they take care of their cats.
Good. Yeah. So hopefully that helps, bro. I mean, I know you could get way more specific about sleep, nutrition, and
which we
whatever.
We definitely can. And I will also say, cut yourself some slack as well at the end of the day. But
you could also go back. Let's give one last sort of tip, Nick, how to get the most out of it. Let's say you're doing all this, but it's still tough. Oh God, what episode was it? And only recently we talked about. Hang on, I'll bring it up for you, bro. It might actually already be. Episode 65, how to break through your jiu-jitsu plateau. So
yes.
A lot of the advice in that would be applicable where it's talking about having structured goals for your training, similar to a weightlifting program, working on, a certain whatever for 1 month, for 6 weeks. That's going to help you see and feel progress as well.
Yeah.
So like, if what we just said makes sense and you haven't listened to episode 65 yet, have a listen to that, and that's going to help you get more out of your training.
Yeah, so cut it down, carve them in stone, work on your nutrition and recovery. And if you do all of those things, obviously you need to manage your own workload, but hopefully we can maximize the time that you can give to, the sport that you love. And that's the goal here, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that being said, let's move on to the next question from Sean.
Hey guys, hey Adam, Kieren. This is Sean Sprague. I live in the United States and state of Rhode Island. I train at Triforce MMA in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, under Peter Jeffrey and Keith Jeffrey. My question is about the protein and the BCAAs that you were talking about. I think it was episode 35. Sorry, excuse me. Anyways, so I eat about 140 to 160 grams of protein per day, all from food, not protein shakes or anything like that. And I drink BCAAs in my water throughout the day. I use that mainly to get off of drinking a ton of diet soda and soda in general. And it worked quite well. I don't take an actual EAA. So I'm wondering if that would even be any benefit or not. I do take the magnesium. I take a regular daily vitamin, fish oil, creatine. Not sure what else off the top of my head, but I take all the basic stuff. So just curious if the EAAs would be worth adding into it, where I'm doing the BCAAs and I'm bringing in 140 to 160 grams of protein from food. Great show, by the way, and looking forward. Bye.
So that question definitely for you, Kieren. That's out of my wheelhouse, but good question, Sean. Thank you. Just for the listeners, before Kieren goes into it, Sean had sent through a message that he didn't put there in the audio, that he weighs about 107 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the weight and size of you is
235 pounds.
Yeah, 235 pounds is going to be important factor to know how much.
Yeah, he's a healthy 235. Yeah, 100%.
So off to you, bro.
Yeah. So first of all, shout out to Triforce, and thanks so much for following up with the episode. We really like getting follow-up questions from any content that we previously published. It's we love that engagement. So there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to try and keep it as succinct as possible, but we are going to get a little bit into the weeds. So when it comes to, first of all, it's great that you're getting most of your protein from food sources. You said 140 to 160 grams of protein per day. Not really part of your question, but I'm going to go there anyway. If you were my nutrition client and I was sort of assessing your macros at a glance without really delving deep into it, I would probably have you on around 230-ish grams of protein. Do with that what you will. That's not medical or official advice. That's just, off the top of my head. And the reason for that is, generally speaking, for an athlete, someone that is, I'm assuming, is as active as you are, you want to aim for around 2 grams of protein per kilogram, or roughly 1 gram of protein per pound. Now, if you're concerned with, if you are, I'm not saying that Sean is, but just for those listening, if you feel like you have a little bit of excess body fat and your weight is a little bit higher than what you would like it or what it should be, should, air quotes, should be, then you can take your lean or your fat-free mass, your FFM, instead of your total body weight. And then the calculation would be more like 3 grams of protein per fat-free mass kilo of body weight. So that's just something to consider, and we can go into more detail. So that's one thing I wanted to get off from the bat. So to your question, when it comes to BCAAs versus EAAs, if you're consuming them as a supplement to support your recovery, to support muscle growth, muscle protein synthesis, then I definitely recommend EAAs. And as Sean mentioned, I think back in our nutrition episode a little while back, we've done a couple now, but I talk about how I don't recommend BCAAs anymore. The reason is you need to understand what BCAAs are. BCAAs are 3 of the essential amino acids. There's 9 essential amino acids that your body uses to create muscle. It uses more, but the reason that they're called essential is because your body can't make them. It needs to get them through food. So a way to remember it is it's essential that you eat them, right? You consume them in some way. Now, BCAAs are 3 of those. They're leucine, isoleucine, and valine. The reason that this is a supplement is because a long time ago, when they were doing a lot of research in this field, they discovered that these 3 magic amino acids triggered muscle protein synthesis, right? And what they found is it's actually the leucine that does most of the heavy lifting here. And they found that these 3 trigger a high response in muscle protein synthesis. However, and this is a big caveat, as research went on in this field, they discovered that just because muscle protein synthesis process had been triggered does not necessarily mean that it was completed efficiently. So think about it like you start a process, but if you're consuming high level of these 3 and not all the 9 that you actually need to complete this process, you're finishing it, but you're not necessarily completing it. And what can happen, and they've shown in some studies, that once your body starts this process, it actually breaks down the amino acids from other proteins in your body, i.e. other muscle, to finish the process, because it needs to gain access to those essential amino acids that your body can't make. So it needs to get them from somewhere. So your body can actually catabolize to then anabolize. And it's a net negative process, right? So if you're consuming EAAs, you're giving your body all of the essential amino acids that you need, that you require to finish that process. And you still have the leucine. Now, what they've also done is in combination with BCAAs, if you ingest something like a whey protein, it can be beneficial. And I think that in the studies that I've seen, it was something along the lines of 15 to 20 grams of whey protein with about 12 grams of BCAAs was what they used. And they showed that it was better than just consuming the equivalent protein for whey because you have that big punch of leucine to trigger that muscle protein synthesis, but then you have the whey protein and all the aminos associated with that to back it up and finish the process. So that's the concept, right? Now, if you're consuming BCAAs on their own and you're not, like maybe you're in a fasted state, you see this a lot, people use them to curb their appetite in a fasted state. First of all, you're actually breaking your fast. And second of all, what you can do is you can actually spike your insulin levels by consuming this supplement, and it becomes a net negative process, as in it's not as beneficial as you think it might be. However, as with everything, there's always caveats on caveats on caveats. If you're using this supplement to not consume like something like Coca-Cola or other soft drinks and fizzy drinks, then, is it good? It's better, right? It's definitely a better alternative. And I will say that essential amino acids are more expensive than branched chain amino acids. My final recommendation is that you ditch the BCAAs, you have essential amino acids instead. But if you don't want to do that, I would combine both of them, right? If you're sipping on them, or combine whey protein with the same. Might not taste great, but you might need to manage that. But I would add either whey protein or essential amino acids to that supplement. Also, my recommendation is to only have it on days that you're actually training. I wouldn't necessarily sip it throughout the day unless you've already trained that day or plan on training in the evening. And that is a lot of information, but in a nutshell, EAAs are better than BCAAs. BCAAs are only 3 of the 9 essential amino acids. So either include EAAs or whey protein with your BCAAs. And if you can avoid it, probably don't buy BCAAs in the first place. I don't think they're worth it, but if you like them, then I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Like you said, better than drinking soda, right?
Definitely. Absolutely.
I'm glad you were here to answer that, because I would have been like, yeah, have them all.
All the A's, man. All the A's.
Have all the A's.
All the A's.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sending that in, Sean. I think we got time for one more, and we've got a follow-up question from Vincent, who asked the strength and conditioning question.
Yes.
So I think we can fit in. He had a second question.
Yep.
So let's
send
let
it.
that roll.
Hey, Kieren and Adam, big fan of the show. My question to you is, how do you prevent cauliflower ear from occurring? Thanks, guys.
Collies.
Just embrace it, bro.
Embrace the us.
Of course.
Embrace the collies.
Yeah. Not everyone wants to have cauliflower ear. Some people definitely don't want it because of what they do for work. It doesn't look good. Well, the simple answer would be training headgear, right? I mean, I know some people might pay you out. It's not uncommon for people to rag on you, but man, wrestlers have been wearing headgear forever, right?
And they still get collies.
Yeah, so it doesn't work. But you got to think about, firstly, some people are more, genetically likely to get cauliflower ear and others aren't. Why? Well, I'm not a doctor, but a GP told me that how cauliflower works. When I first got cauliflower, it was explained to me like this, that it's when you have trauma to the ear. So it's not only like the rubbing of the ear, like boxers can get cauliflower ear as well, right? It's just any trauma that can happen to the ear. The cartilage of the ear and the skin of the ear like kind of separate and inflame, and it fills with fluid, right? And that's the fluid that people are draining out of their ear. If you don't drain that fluid then like that kind of clots and solidifies, and that's
calcifies, right?
Yeah, and that's what becomes cauliflower ear. If you've never felt someone's cauliflower ear, or if you don't have it, like it's rock solid where the collie forms.
Yeah, feels cool.
Yeah. So some people have really, flexible cartilage and whatever in their ears. So it's almost like no trauma to it will damage it. Right? Whereas other people get cauliflower ear really easily because any sort of trauma to their ear damages that cartilage. So that's the first thing. So you might be someone who's super likely to get it or have got it or whatever it is. Not much you can do about that. The second thing to consider is it also depends on your style of jiu-jitsu. If you are a head-heavy pressure passer, you're someone who does like over-under passes, shoots double legs, you're in there with your head, right? You're definitely much more likely to develop trauma to the ear, and as a result, you're much more likely to have trauma to the ear and as a result develop cauliflower. If you're someone who, plays guard and never gets your guard passed, as in you never have someone cross-face your head, right? Well, you're probably going to be pretty sweet. So your style also will kind of dictate your likeliness of having some type of trauma to your ear. But as a whole, really, if you really kind of don't want to go down that route, you got to get headgear. I've trained before with like people who were actors, right? So they always had headgear. They didn't want to get cauliflower ear, or maybe someone who, I don't know, they're a lawyer. They've always got to be in court and stuff. They just don't want that look of cauliflower ear.
Like that stigma of being like
but yeah, there's no sort of magical, rub banana peels on your ears.
On your toes.
Yeah. Put banana peels on your toes and you won't get cauliflower ear. Yeah, no magic answer, unfortunately, Vincent. But some
definitely
people.
Headgear would help. And your style.
Headgear and your style, because you can't do anything about your genetics in terms of whether you got really flexible ears.
And what about if it occurs, how to reduce the impact?
Yeah, so if it occurs, like I said, that fluid, if you let it solidify, then you're screwed. So you've got to drain it pretty much straight away. How do you drain it? Well, you can do it yourself, right? Or like have someone help you, which is by shoving a needle in it and draining it out. It can be a little trickier though. We recently tried to drain Nogi Rob's ear at the gym, and like I've drained a couple of cauliflower ears, mostly my own, and I thought I was quite surprised we couldn't get anything out of it. And then I said, man, look, I'm sorry, bro, I couldn't get anything out of it. Go to the doctor because we've like stabbed your inflamed ear like 5 times with a needle. So we don't want it to get infected. And B, like if it solidifies, bro, you're then screwed. If you don't want it, you're then screwed. And he went to the GP and they actually said, oh, you needed a bigger gauge needle. And we had a pretty big one. And that we needed to kind of move the needle around in the ear to break up the clot so we could drain it.
This is definitely not medical advice.
No, sorry. Yeah. This is not medical advice, right? So really, what to do if you get it, drain it, go to a doctor, right? Yeah. But you can try yourself if you want.
Fuck it. You can try anything.
You can try,
You can do anything you want.
There's so many YouTube videos of people draining cauliflower ears, right?
Yeah, some of them they get a shitload of fluid out of it.
Crazy, man. But just keep in mind that if you do drain it, let's say even if you get a doctor to drain it, like any inflammation, the next day there might be more fluid in there again. I think the reason people do it themselves is to save, especially Americans, to save medical bills, right? Because healthcare. But also because if you get a GP to do it, you then might find the next day you need to go back to the GP because it, like any swelling or inflammation, it doesn't just go away. It takes time to calm down. So then it fills with more fluid and now you're presented with the same problem. If you really want it to go away, it's like this. The cartilage and skin have separated. It's filled with fluid. You want the cartilage and skin to heal and stick back together. So you have to keep taking out the fluid, right? So it can stick back together, right? So you take it out, it sticks together. Well, like it starts being in contact again, but then it fills with more fluid. You got to take it out until it stops filling with fluid. That's cauliflower ear.
Yeah. And if you've never had it, I will say that Like after it's solidified, after it's calcified and it's hard, it feels great. Like it's fine. But during the inflammation, it's very painful.
It is
like training
it is
with a
way more painful. If you haven't had Collie yet, it is way more painful than people think.
Oh yeah, it's
fucking
super
hurts.
painful. Like I remember I was going through it last year and I asked you like, what do I do? Rah, rah, you like drain it. And I left it too late. It wasn't that bad, you know, but it was very painful. And you're like, well, you got two options. You can either put something on your head, wear headgear, or you can not train. Which one? And I'm like, well, I didn't do either. I took option 3. It was like train through it anyway.
Yeah, or train without headgear. Yeah.
I was like,
I
fuck
mean,
it.
yeah, it's very painful. My first Collie, my second one was I had to sleep with headgear. I couldn't even put my head on a pillow.
I remember
bro.
you telling me that.
But mine got infected as well.
Yeah, that's bad.
That's definitely a possible
stabbed
side effect of draining it yourself, right? It can get infected. So,
oh shit, terrible. But I will say thank you so much for everyone that submitted their questions.
People getting on board with the audio questions, much better.
We love audio questions, and I mean, by the time this episode airs, we probably would have already recorded like up to episode 74-ish. So episode 80 is not that far away from when you were actually listening to this. So if you want to get on board the Q&A train for the next Ask a Black Belt segment, which will be number 7, episode 80, it's coming up quick. You can submit a question to the show via our audio link, which is in our link tree in our Instagram bio. Our Instagram is @BeyondJujitsu_podcast. So get amongst that if you want to hear your voice on the show. But
otherwise, thanks so much for the questions, guys. Enjoyed actually hearing the listeners' questions. And as Kieren said, episode 80 not too far off. So get amongst it. Stay training, guys. And thank you very much.